Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Prog Report podcast. Very special episode. We are going to tackle another Ultimate album. Today, we're doing Ultimate Prog Metal Album, which should be a lot of fun. And joining us is who we consider the Prog Metal expert, Mr. Jeff Wagner, my old friend. How are you, sir?
Thank you. I'm great.
We've actually swapped out Jeffs for anybody wondering what happened to the other Jeff, because this is a metal show, and
well, you took Jeff and you made him more metal.
We made him more metal. We gave him long hair.
Got longer hair. Yeah.
Less G, more of a J.
So to give a little background, Jeff and I used to work together in our record label days, and he was an editor for Metal Maniacs magazine and an author of quite a few books, which we're going to talk about. But also, if you needed a history of prog metal, this is it right here, Mean Deviation. This is like a crazy book that is basically anything you ever wanted to know about progressive metal and its history, and it's fantastic. So highly recommend that. I want to give him a shout out for that book. Let me backtrack. Let me introduce everyone else. Daniel Levy, Kyle Fagala, and Victor Giol.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Got to give everybody a intro. But I want to ask you about, because you recently posted a really cool announcement about a secret project you've been working on, which is a Fates Warning autobiography, an authorized one with the band and everything. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, I did the little soft launch, as the kids say. Just got the cover out there. I've been working on it for about 2.5 years, and just kind of having gotten to know Jim Mateos over the years through various hats I've worn and intersections we've had. I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan, and I've finally wanted to get back on the book saddle and just write another thing. And when I was considering what I wanted to do, I always look at my bookshelf and go, well, what's not on there that I'd like to have? So I did the Fates Warning book. I took it on myself. I wasn't sure how much of a story they would have, because it's not like Motley Crue, The Dirt, where there's a lot of drugs and groupies and all this. But I'm also not that interested in that. But I actually found a lot that was very, very interesting that I didn't even know. And Jim was extremely helpful, and he granted me access to everybody, currently in the band, or, all the ex-members. I literally talked to every single person that had been through the band as an official member, other than maybe Jason Keyser and guest keyboardists and stuff. But yeah, he was great. And they're all a fantastic group of guys. And I'm real psyched with the book. I've been working on it really hard, and it's going to look great, hopefully read well. And yeah, I'm excited to get it out. It should be out by the end of the year.
That's fantastic. Looking forward to it, man. That should be really good.
It's a celebration of all fates too. I didn't favor Arch. I didn't favor Alder. I'm one of these fans that, I appreciate all of their eras. So I wanted to give everyone equal footing and an equal look.
Yeah. And we should also give a shout out to your podcast, which is called Radical Research. You and your friend, I apologize, his name, right? Hunter Ginn. And you guys cover some crazy out there music on that. So definitely check that out if you want to hear about bands you've never heard of. You do some bands we have heard of, to be fair.
Yeah.
But you guys uncover a lot of crazy stuff on there, so that's a lot of fun and cool podcast that actually Rolling Stone covered. So
yeah, they did. The short word on Radical Research is this: there's 30,000 podcasts out there in music, apparently. I figured if I was going to start one, I better do something that like nobody else is covering. So you look at the 30,000 and you go, well, what aren't they doing? So that's
yeah. There you go.
There is a YouTube channel that's run by a Canadian gentleman called Sam Dunn, Banger TV. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff. Is it Banger TV?
I think that's Banger Films is what he goes as. Yeah.
And it's really cool. I recommend people to go check it out, because Sam, I don't know exactly how long ago it was, but he did a great, almost like a breakdown of the origins of metal. And then he goes into all the different subgenres. And he goes into extreme metal, he'll go into prog metal, and it's a really cool way of just seeing where everything is at. And Jeff, I know that Jeff has contributed to that. I knew Jeff before I saw him on this documentary. So when I saw him in the documentary, I was like, holy moly, Jeff's a big deal.
That was filmed in 2012. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I know it was a while ago, and he's expanded on it a little bit, but I thought it was really, really well done. Had never seen anything beforehand, and he really covers all his bases. You could tell that he's a fan and he's passionate.
Yeah.
I remember when Roy had started the Prog Report, this was kind of, what I thought that the metal world needed was somebody to actually start cataloging all these things, because it's been around long enough to be a respected music form, art form, and it's so well done. So really cool that you got to be a part of that as well.
Yeah, it was fun. I went up to Brooklyn to film it and was nervous as hell, but yeah, it was fine. He put me at ease because he's just like us, right? I think it's called Metal Evolution, right?
Yes,
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, anything else that we need to know about what you working on? Any other books happening? Or
Well, I'm definitely doing a Voivod book next.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've gotten band and management approval for that. I've been doing interviews. The Fates Warning one kind of took a head of steam, and just to use the cliche, it kind of took on a life of its own.
Yeah.
So I put the Voivod one on the back burner, but that's definitely happening. So that's the next one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So we'll look forward to that. All right. I'm really excited to see what you end up picking on this, because I know you might have a few surprises, and we don't really have an order of who's going to go where. So, let's say,
I had to go last
I know.
time.
I was just looking at you, and I was going to say, let's go Kyle. All right. So we're going to go Kyle first, Daniel second. Actually, the way my screen is looking, so we'll go Kyle, Daniel, Jeff, myself, and Victor, and then we'll go around. So Jeff, we're each picking 3 songs. Once your song's off the board, you can't pick it. We generally don't end up repeating bands, but that's not against the rules. There's no rules. So like we thought we'd have 3 Dream Theater songs on our last podcast, and we had 1. Right. So you never know how to work out. All right, Kyle. So you're up.
Okay. Well, I wanted to go first selfishly because we all know this band's coming, but I think if we're going to do a list of the essential prog rock songs, you got to go with the band. Metal. Man, the essential prog metal. Oh, wait, we're doing prog metal? Shoot, I got to change my list.
throw your papers in the air.
So radio.
Grab the other stack of papers.
Yeah. So prog metal, you got to pick the band that inspired the genre as I see it. If any one band did, and I guess maybe someone could argue for Fates or for Queensrÿche or some others, but I think the band that really invented the blueprint for prog metal that we know today is Dream Theater. So I'll start with Dream Theater. Then the question becomes, well, what song do you pick by Dream Theater? For me, if you're going to pick the band that inspired prog metal as a genre, you got to pick the song that inspired an entire album. So I'm going to go with Metropolis Part 1. The Miracle and the Sleeper. We didn't get this in our list of the 90s prog rock essential album, which we didn't because we had a change of seasons, and certainly you could have picked a few others too, but I was disappointed because I think Roy knows this, but when you counted down the top 50 prog rock songs, I think you had this at 1. I think so. Something like that.
No, I think,
it deserves it. I think Pull Me Under, like on a nostalgic level or on like an influential level, you could pick that. But for me, I think in terms of inspiring all the different aspects of prog metal that you see in the genre today, I think this covers all of them. And so obviously there's like that middle section that's just unreal. And as good as I think I am at the drums, if I ever listen to that section and try and keep up with it, I realize that I'm not very good. And so I think it remains their signature track for a reason. So yeah, Metropolis.
I mean, Pull Me Under got us all in the door, to check it out. But when I hit Metropolis, listening to the album, that changed the game. That changed everything. And you just got to remember that by now there's a million bands doing that kind of stuff that's more complicated, 8-string guitars and whatever else is going on. But back then, that was insanity. I mean, it really was like we hadn't heard anything like it. So, yeah, I think that's warranted. Jeff, where are you on Dream Theater? I mean, are you still a fan? You still?
I'd say the last 8 or 9 albums. There's a couple I love, and then some I just don't like at all. I thought Distance Over Time was great for the most part. Just it's more song oriented, which is why I like Octavarium. But I love the first 3. I got into them in '89 with the first album, and they were doing something so unique. It felt so different. It felt like a hybrid of some of the other things that we were all liking, whether it was Kansas or Metallica or whatever. They just kind of brought this all together, you know.
Yep.
And I love Images and Words, and Metropolis is utterly fantastic. Probably my favorite song on that album. So Kyle's absolutely spot on. I think.
Nice. Perfect. All right, let's move on. Dan,
not a particularly controversial pick. I get it.
No, but it's one that had to
Doesn't
be.
have to
I mean,
be.
It was, you know.
Yeah, no, it's a great pick. So I'll start off by saying that this theme for the podcast is perfect for all of us, and it's perfect for me too. But that doesn't mean I'm happy about it. No. I only got 3 picks, and I need like at least 7. And the worst part is that I don't trust any of you to cover for me. But we'll leave that for the honorable mentions later. I think this band could not be on this list. It's Opeth, a band that likes to change and constantly evolve their sound. Michael is a household name in the prog world for his innovation and songwriting. The song I'm picking is my personal favorite song, Harlequin Forest, from their album Ghost Reveries. This is the shortest of the songs I'm picking, spoiler alert, but nevertheless, it still takes you on a journey. It's like 11 minutes, I think. Michael's clean vocals only get better over time. And this is a display of him combining them with a great syncopated guitar riffs that Opeth is known for. Not only that, we get beautiful clean guitar sections, we get the guitar duets and the growls too. And the growls here, they aren't used just for the sake of being evil or edgy. They serve a purpose and work perfectly in their context. So yeah, you got a perfect Opeth song right here. With everything they do, done well.
You like that album.
Yeah.
You always go back to that album. Is that your favorite album?
Yeah, I think Ghost Reveries is probably a top pick for me. And I love Pale Communion too. I like Still Life, the one we mentioned last time. Blackwater Park, of course, a classic. But Ghost Reveries, it hits that perfect sweet spot there in the middle of the era. It's great stuff.
Yeah.
Daniel, I got a question for you, Daniel, because Opeth is, I think, a very interesting band because in their evolution of sound, they started out as a death metal band with growls and really fast technical stuff. And then they have morphed into what they are now.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to consider them for a, progressive metal list, I really wouldn't go to the newer stuff. Can't go to the older stuff because it's not progressive. So at which point is Ghost Reveries the point where you feel that they have?
I think the point where I feel it becomes progressive enough to call it prog is Still Life. That's the transition point. But you get a lot of proggy stuff in the middle before. Even Morning Rise has songs that are like lots of odd time signatures, and you mix in the acoustic guitars with different elements. But the song I picked, Harlequin Forest, is from Ghost Reveries, and it's dead center in their catalog. It's that sweet spot between the prog and the death metal and how they change and use different elements. I think it's a perfect pick for this particular topic.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Jeff, chime in, man, if you have comments and stuff.
Oh, I have so many comments.
Don't wait for us to ask. I mean, just
First of all, Harlequin Forest
is your band too. So
yeah, absolutely. Harlequin Forest is a highlight. So again,
Yep.
I have to agree. I disagree that they were never death metal enough to not be progressive. I think even the first album, Orchid, plenty of progressive moments on there. Like
it has
Daniel said,
like a full piano song on Orchid.
For sure. Yeah, they were always there. I just think they expanded it and certainly brought in more of the 70s influences as they went along. But even the second album just has that earthy vibe that the 70s prog rock albums had. It's well known that Michael was always fully into that stuff. And to me, they always had one foot in 70s prog rock as much as they did metal. I just feel like they sort of became prog in quotes with Still Life. I think that's a good marker to where they really began to appeal to that crowd, I guess.
Is there a point where they cease to be prog metal in your opinion?
Well, sure, Heritage. I mean, but
everybody says that's the one. Yeah.
That was a very
Heritage
conscious decision. And one
straight
thing
up prog rock. Yeah.
it's totally prog rock, and that's all they've been since. I mean, Sorceress has plenty of metal, but it doesn't have the metal that they started with, which was the more death metal, Morbid Angel influenced vocal type stuff. And really, you know, I don't get Opeth fans who don't like the new stuff. I mean, you can not like it, that's fine, but there's just so much backlash by some people against Michael dropping the harsh vocals. But to me, as a listener since the first album, like, they were always going that way. Like, it's not a surprise that Opeth is this now. That's where they were always going. And I feel like they listen to the other 9 albums with the heavy vocals if you don't like it, you know. And it just, I don't get it. I don't get the backlash.
I agree with you. It's a gradual evolution. You can hear the influence in the beginning and it gradually goes over time. And I love all their stuff, literally, from Orchid to the latest one.
Same. Yeah.
So
same.
even though it sounds different, it's still great stuff. It's well-composed songs.
Completely agree.
Opeth.
Yeah.
Opeth.
I mean,
Right
it's
here.
still, the thing with them is that they never went like pop. You know, it's still pretty heavy, elaborate, you know, progressive. You know, he just doesn't growl. I mean, sort of. I mean, it's not like they went and made Invisible Touch. Let's keep it in perspective.
Future bites.
Or Future Bites.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Ooh.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, Jeff, your pick. Let's see. Your first pick.
Well, you said we can't pick the same songs, but we can pick the same bands.
Yeah.
Well, I had Opeth on my list. So we're going to keep talking about Opeth, if that's okay.
Okay.
I picked Black Rose Immortal, the very lengthy song from the second album, Morning Rise, because that is the one that absolutely shows that they were bucking anything that was popular or familiar at the time in metal. It's just a quintessential early Opeth song that shows them as a fully formed progressive band. And whether you want to call them rock or metal, doesn't matter. I just think that's a high point for early Opeth. I mean, their prominent bass work on a fretless, the earthy 70s recording, just all the different twists and turns, the maze-like turns that might remind you of Close to the Edge. If you know, like a prog rock listener coming into Opeth with this song, would be reminded more of the 20-minute epics from the 70s than anything that was current at the time in the mid 90s in metal, I think. So that's where I'm at with it. And I think Morning Rise in general is an album that is a high point in their early records. And yeah, Black Rose Immortal.
Nice.
Great
Okay.
pick.
Well, we've never gone
It's-
2 songs in.
Yeah,
by the same
never
band
has
in a
that happened.
row.
Uh-oh.
So this is
And-
record breaking.
I'm never going
it's
to get invited back.
Well, no,
Oh, no.
actually, it's safe to say that the biggest fan in the world of yours right now is Daniel.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm torn because I'm thinking, oh man, I could have got a different band. What can you do?
That's funny. All right. This is so tough, man. I always look at the bands I wrote down and I just don't know where to go. But I'm
Not
gonna
Opeth.
yeah. I can promise it's not Opeth. I'm gonna jump to a newer band just because I want to make sure I get this song in and I don't want anybody to steal my pick from this band. So I'm gonna
know
go
what's coming.
Haken. I'm gonna go Haken, and I think it might be a surprising pick, but I'm gonna go Celestial Elixir
Ooh.
from
I
the
approve.
first album. And I've been listening to this song recently again a lot, and it wasn't my favorite song by them when I first was getting into the band, but over the years it's become my favorite song by them. And I think it's got everything in it is just perfect. And the thing that makes me even more impressed about it is that they wrote that song on their debut album, which is insane. And I think it's one of the best debut albums you'll hear by any band ever, frankly. They've made better albums along the way that I like better. But that song, just the quirkiness about it, the chorus is awesome. You know, the shredding in the middle, the breakdown, it's 17 minutes, the whole thing. To write that on your first album, I think is just incredible. And I think it's a song that over the years has gotten maybe overlooked. They have played it live recently many times, but I think that song still stands as what they ended up doing kind of later. It's the song that sticks out from that album as like, this is what Haken's going to be. So that's my pick.
Yeah, I got a couple of things to say about Haken
Yeah.
and how I love Aquarius. think that album is great, and the quirkiness that you mentioned, it's apparent. And even though it's their album that sounds mostly like Dream Theater and other bands than what they would become and evolve into their own sound, that's still like a great pick and album. Even though I think even some of the band members aren't even so much fond of that early years anymore, but I love it too. And I think it's an interesting topic, and it would be a podcast on its own. What is your Haken album rankings? Because I cannot for the life of me choose, man. I think all of the albums are constantly
It's
great,
tough.
and they are always on like that way above average level.
Well, they've never made the same album. I mean, the closest is the last
Yeah.
two, but
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
sort of by design.
Right.
Mhm.
But I mean, from Aquarius to Visions to Mountain to Affinity, they're all different, very different. And it would be a really tough one to pick, honestly. But yeah, I love the band. I think they're top 5, current active band, out there. Easy.
Haken to me is a band that I try not to be a victim of the moment because they're relatively new, but they have really come up with some very strong releases. I got into them right before Progressive Nation in 2014, Progressive Nation at Sea. I was listening to Visions, and then The Mountain had just come out, and it was such a different sounding palette than what they had done with Visions, but they both equally captivated me. Then I went back and listened to specifically Celestial Elixir because it was a very long song and I was just curious. And yeah, same reaction, almost the same reaction that I had with Metropolis. And you get to that middle section and you're like, okay, these guys are they're not within the box. They're going out on their own, and it was a lot of fun to listen to. So I like the pick.
You make a good point too by saying that, you don't want to like, I think we tend to like with these sorts of exercises, go for some of the older stuff, the classics. But I think Haken, like Leprous and like Big Big Train, well, these are some bands that probably be talked about in 30, 40 years by prog fans. So yes, they're modern, but I think they're going to stay. I think they're going to stick with people. You know what I mean?
So Vic, let's jump to your first pick.
Oh goodness, this is a lot of pressure. You guys have picked some excellent bands. I know we only got 3 bands out of 4 picks, but I really like that direction that this is going. Now, the band that I am bringing up, and this band, I think it's very similar to Opeth from the standpoint of if you listen to even their first album and you listen to them through now, they've always had, as they have matured their sound, they've always had the psychedelic proggy side, but with some really brutal metal side. The band is between The Buried and Me. They hail by Jeff there in North Carolina.
Yep.
These guys have, if you listen to their discography, even their early stuff where they didn't have the current lineup that they have now, which is a lot more proggier. But even back then, they had some selections that were really, would go into the mellow psychedelic realm, and it was really cool. So in trying to pick a song for this band, I pretty much picked a song that I felt represented them the best from their early to their later stuff, which, I'm a big fan. I really like all of it. Yeah, I had a very difficult time doing that. But I think the best representative work for them, and it turns out to be a 17-minute epic. The name is Swim to the Moon from their album The Great Misdirect back in 2009. One of the things that people can't they can't tolerate about Between the Buried and Me is just the growling. There's a lot. It's, you got growling and blast beats, double bass, there's some extreme stuff that's in there. And one of the knock that I've heard of them is, especially when it comes to the prog community, because we are so hyper focused on melodies, on memorable hooks, that's, pretty much the Beatles taught us that a good melody is priceless and timeless. But this song does have a great chorus to it, and it has the heavier stuff on it, and it has some great breakdowns where they just are really mellow. You got some acoustic work. Tommy Giles Rogers does a really good job with, mixing the singing with the growling. And it's your, hate to use the word again because it seems to be used a lot, it's quintessential BT Bam.
We need
when
like
you
a
listen to
thing
the
where
song.
people say quintessential on our podcast, like it goes ding, and we get like a counter,
The counter, yeah.
like a running
It's-
counter.
We got to find a different word that means it represents everything in their career equally.
Yeah.
Emblematic.
That's another one. So
Look, they're a band that I like a lot, but I don't often find myself listening to them. It's to listen to them is so intense. It requires, it's just not something you can put in the background. I find it needs to be like, okay, I'm going to listen to this now because it's so much.
Isn't it? Don't they do a lot of long albums? I mean, I have some,
Yeah.
but I think they tend to record too long because that type of material, I know this from listening to a lot of extreme metal, that's best at 35, 40 minutes. It's not a 75-minute workout. It's exhausting for even the most hardened.
It's really relentless, and it's
Yeah.
just like you really got to sit. I know a lot of people do like that type of music more. It's not my favorite type of prog metal, but I do like them. I think they're great, and I have a bunch of their albums. But I don't love it all. It's one level too much on the other side of Opeth or something, but to listen to often for me. But great band anyway, and a good choice there. So that's our first round is so we got Dream Theater Metropolis, 2 Opeth songs, Harlequin Forest, Black Rose, Immortal, Haken Celestial Elixir, and BT Bam, Swim to the Moon. It's our first round. So Kyle, round number 2.
And I'm excited. And I wore a black shirt since we were talking about prog metal. So I was trying to, it looks like three of us got the memo on that. And then 2 red, which is, I assume for blood, which is, very metal. So great. So I'm going to go with a band that you could argue is the most popular and the best known band that plays prog metal. And now you're wondering, who might that be? I think this is a band much like Pink Floyd. You could probably say the same thing of Pink Floyd as it pertains prog rock. I think they're maybe not classified as prog metal because they are so popular. And the band is Tool. And no, the song is not Stinkfist. Sorry, Vic.
Not this time.
That's
but
okay.
I'm going to go with what I feel like is their greatest accomplishment as a prog rock song. And that would be 2001's Lateralis. Why I picked that, and go with me for a second. Vic was trying to explain like lyrical, details and things.
Don't make the mistake I made. Just stay away from that stuff.
I think it's important to at least get this across the finish line. I tried this when we were talking about Danny Carey as a drummer, but the original title of this song was 987, and it refers to the time signatures that alternate between 9/8, 8/8, and 7/8. 987 is also the 16th number of the Fibonacci sequence. And so they use that Fibonacci sequence, they're all into numbers, and especially Danny Carey. In the Fibonacci sequence is what shows up in like ferns and pine cones and this sort of thing. There's a lot you can read about that. And it's a thing where the next number in the sequence is you take the 2 numbers before it and add it together. So you got like 0 and then 1. 0 plus 1 is 1. So the next number is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. So you keep going down the line. And so even in the way that Maynard has written his lyrics, it follows that pattern. And so from syllables, you got 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 5, 3. Also, Danny Carey's drumming follows this same pattern. And so you can watch more videos about it. But just all that to say is that as a progressive rock and progressive metal concept, I just don't know that there's anything that really matches that on that kind of mathematical level.
You've convinced us. We are convinced.
Yes, it is prog.
Yeah, we've reached peak prog
yeah.
metal nerdiness right now. We're like right there.
The reason I bring it up is that I feel like it's important with an essential album to get in there music that has inspired and influenced, whether it's bands in prog metal or not, but bands that take that approach. And so when you look at like math rock and things that come out of different genres and swim in different streams, they're definitely influenced by this sort of approach. And it happens to be a really great song with really cool parts and grooves, and Tool does what Tool does, right? But to me, this is kind of the apex of them as a prog metal band. Okay, the end.
You make a ton of great points. I love the whole like numerology,
right,
reflecting nature and nature's sort of patterns, and Danny Carey, of course, being really into all that kind of stuff. You could do a book on that. But what's great about Tool is like they take these overarching, like high concept sort of ideas, but the final product doesn't confuse, right? It's actually really accessible for people. They somehow smooth it out despite being 9/8, 8/8, 7/8, all this weird stuff going on. That's one of the magic elements of Tool, I think, is that ability to sort of appeal to a broad base, but stay so sophisticated in their concepts, right? It's just, it's astounding.
Well,
it's
they're one of a kind. To fill an
Oh,
arena playing
yeah.
a song in 9/8, 8/8, 7/8.
Sure. Yeah.
About the Fibonacci sequence.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Yep. You said it.
Bruno Mars was going to have a Fibonacci sequence song in his last album, but he opted for something about champagne rooms instead.
Lame.
So, you know.
Fell
Fell
out.
out.
I have seen Bruno Mars twice. I'm not going to lie about that. But anyway, I digress.
Yes. All right,
Good.
Dan, your pick.
Okay, let's go. My second pick. This is a band that's already a modern classic on the prog metal genre. Their last 3 albums are all masterpieces in my eyes, and they're, in my opinion, one of the 3 bands that are carrying the prog metal torch right now. This trinity, 2 of them were mentioned, Haken and Leprous. The third one is Caligula's Horse. You've heard us, like mostly me, talk about them a million times. But the song I'm picking is their epic Graves. Not Kyle Graves, just Graves. This song has everything they're good at. The riffs and themes are top notch. You could say it's a quintessential song or even an emblematic song. Structurally, it takes a lot of very creative liberties, and the result is most likely their most popular song amongst fans. I think it's probably number 1 on most everyone's list. So it's a 15-minute ride with some fantastic vocals, lyrics,
And
great
saxophone.
Yeah, and legacy. I'll get there. And an amazing band behind it. That's the thing. If you're a fan of any of the other bands we're talking about here today, chances are you're gonna love this song and band. And like just the last section with the crowd chanting and the saxophone is something that's very unique to them and to that album, and I think represents the evolution of prog metal very well.
Yep. Well, I
Does-
knew you were picking them, so I didn't even think, I didn't even
Yeah.
worry about having
No,
to. But
I
if
had
not, I
to.
would have gone with that song too. So that was a great choice.
Yeah, and their guitarist Sam literally has a PhD on progressive metal. So how could I not pick it?
Yeah.
Wow. Dr. Prog Metal.
So
Yep.
he's
That's
like
amazing.
even so his analysis of the prog music would be even nerdier than what Fagala
Can you
just
believe
did
that?
for
Yep.
Tool.
Not possible.
Yeah.
So doesn't the presence of a saxophone mean it's not prog metal? Doesn't the saxophone bring it down a notch?
No,
Nah, I think
he-
that's
elevates
super.
it.
That's super prog metal to
Yeah,
throw
that's
that in
super
there.
prog.
Richard Henshaw in his solo album The Cocoon a couple of years ago, in one of his opening songs, in a really heavy part, had this really just weird saxophone part in there, and it fit right in, and that was metal. So
The thing
We
is,
should
you
do,
can
we
make
should do best use of saxophone in a prog metal song podcast.
it's Graves.
4
Isan
songs.
would be in there if anybody's interested in that.
Which one?
Isan, the ex-emperor.
Oh yeah,
guy,
yeah,
oh,
sure, yeah.
okay.
he used the guy from Shining on sax.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff,
Nice.
your pick. Your next pick.
Roy's like,
Well,
next.
This pick is anybody that knows me is probably not going to be surprised. In fact, not with the next 2 picks, but I got to go with these guys because they just mean so much, not only to me, but in my opinion, to this entire diaspora that we're talking about. They were the first band that I was into as a kid. They weren't quite progressive yet, but they were mentioning all these progressive rock bands, Vandergraaf Generator, King Crimson, and they got me so excited. And that's Voivod from Canada. And they epitomize progressive, as I understand it, just because every single step in their evolution is brave, different. They're searching. They're trying new things. They respond to what's happening with technology and what's out there available to them. And I've always just found them so fascinating. And my pick for them is a 17-minute song called Jack Luminous from their Outer Limits album from 1993. this is a song that they finally got to this point in their musicality where they were like, we can do a long prog song now. Like we think we've mastered our instruments enough and our compositional skills enough to take a page from Van der Graaf Generator. They actually are huge Van der Graaf Generator fans, and they even called this their version of Plague of Lighthouse Keepers, which is one of the great epics from the 70s. And Jack Luminous exists as the longest and by far most progressive song in their very progressive catalog. And I think with this, the production on Outer Limits is shimmering and clean. And I just feel like people that don't think they like Voivod, if they give this song a listen, they will completely understand why I'm electing to throw it in with all these other Between the Buried Enemies and Opeths and Hakens and everything else we've talked about.
No, it's cool to include them for sure. And you know, it's not a band that gets enough play on within our group. I don't think anybody's like a big fan. Maybe Vic is or more familiar, but you know, it's not a band I thought of as a prog band until the last few years when I started to see Prog Magazine writing about them, and from you and I talking and actually getting to work with them a little bit and realizing that they really have that kind of background, which I always thought they were just sort of a metal band, you know, that and not really along those lines. But no, but it's cool, and they definitely are included in that, and I think worthy of putting in here, sure, as an influence.
And if we're talking about metal being progressive, and we're doing a progressive metal thing, I think they absolutely have to be there. So that's
for sure.
Why my pick. Yeah.
Solid pick. Am I up now? Oh, look at that. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess I'm going to go, wow, this is crazy. So many choices. I'm going to go, well, I can't believe we haven't gotten to this band yet. And so I'm going to go Porcupine Tree, Anesthetize from Fear of a Blank Planet. And it's surprising that we got this song without mentioning Steven Wilson on a podcast. But
I did mention the Future Bites.
That's right. We did mention the Future Bites. Yeah, you know, it's tough because to me, sometimes they don't cross over enough to that progressive metal, especially the earlier records, you know, Light Bulb Sun, Stupid Dream. In Absentia starts to kind of broach that a little bit. And then Deadwing is really just more sort of progressive than I don't think there's that much metal on it. It's a couple of metal sections.
Yeah.
But Fear of a Blank Planet's really their metal record. And this is their epic song that I think ranks up there and probably in the top 3, if not favorite song for most PT fans. Yeah, just a killer song, you know, 17 minutes. What else can you say about it? I think this is the one you go to if you're talking Porcupine Tree as a progressive metal group, and one that had to be on here.
I think it's the most unique way to do progressive metal. You know, Steven Wilson, he's a genius, whether you like it or not. But the way he approaches the heaviness, the guitar riffs, and the metal, he views it as elements, not as a genre or anything. So he uses it to make the song be augmented in some way. And I think that's the beauty of it. When you go to Fear of a Blank Planet, it has a different atmosphere because he used that stuff just like he would use a different instrument or a different technique. It's a very unique way to do it. And it works very well. And I had in my honorable mentions Blackest Ice because I think it's heavier and it works better in the metal context. But Anesthetize is my favorite song by PT. So yeah, amazing pick.
You can track when Steven Wilson got into Meshuggah. It was in Absentia. You start hearing those kind of riffs, you know. Yeah.
Well, and also he started working with Michael from Opeth around the same period and took from that. So they influenced each other a lot, and you can hear it on both sides.
True.
Yep.
So, all right, Vic, you're for your second pick. Sorry.
I'm kind of following suit with thinking back to the 90s ultimate prog. And this is a band where I had a hard time picking a song for them back for that one. They have to be on this list. They are the godfathers of and I've said this before, they're the godfathers of the gent subgenre of progressive metal. Of course, the band is Meshuggah. And just picking a song up, I'm just thinking progressive metal, everything that they do is insane, as we spoke about last time. I'll just cut to the chase. From their album Obzin, I'm picking their opening track, Bleed. And, it's one of those songs where, actually, excuse me, it's not the opening track, it's the third track. Their song Bleed is just, when it starts out, is just metal in your face with the rhythm guitars just going right along with a kick. These guys are insane, and that's just something that they trick you into headbanging, and all of a sudden they have that quick shift of time signature, and all of a sudden you're trying to figure things out again. Just the power is great, and it's metal, and these guys are just legends in influencing many of the bands that have continued on with that sound. So just play Bleed.
Awesome.
Yeah. If I was gonna, as a drummer, if I was gonna pick like a single most famous prog metal drum part, it would probably be that, in terms of how influential it is.
Wow, really?
If I was gonna pick like a metal part, it'd be like One or something, by Metallic. Like it's thought of in that way. I'm probably missing something, forgetting something, whatever, maybe Under Glass Moon or something. But that Herda that he's doing, which is like a alternating drag kind of thing, like really taken from like military drumming and like on a snare, placing it onto the feet. And so when he learned that, it took him several months to be able to play it correctly. It's truly like a next level technical drumming part that now 8-year-old, Asian females can play on YouTube. But in the day, it was really influential and a huge deal, and a really big part of that technical side of prog metal that we see in drumming today.
Yeah. All right. Nice one. All right. So second round. Oh, wait. Did we do all of? Yeah, we did.
Yep.
So second round was Lateralis from Tool, Caligula's Horse with Graves, Voivod, Jack Luminous, Porcupine Tree, Anensitize, and Meshuggah with Bleed. So I mean, there's a lot of famous bands still not on this thing, guys. Queensryche, Fates Warning, Devin Townsend. I'm just where I had some people I had written down here. We haven't even.
We got to do some cleanup here.
So let's see what we. Yeah. All right, Kyle, you're up.
Well, it won't be me, so I hope someone else gets Pain of Salvation and some of these other ones in. I just assumed some people would go in different directions, but hey,
Oh man.
so we have honorable mentions for a reason. So I'm going to go in just a little bit different direction, but one that I feel like fits and works, and it's a song that I personally really like, and I want to see this band included in this conversation. And this is a song that was part of their 2009 album, Crack the Sky. And this is the band Mastodon and the song Oblivion. So this album that I just like wore out.
That's not a crazy pick, but
You like that pick?
not a crazy pick, but certainly, I hope the rest of you clean up for me. But a couple things I want to mention about Mastodon is it's interesting with an album like this. This is not a true like prog metal band it's always churning out prog metal, but this is kind of like their prog metal album, if any one of them is. You got 3 lead singers in this group, and you've got Brent Hines that during the work on this album, he listened to Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson every day, his inspiration. That's what he said. And then Bran, the drummer, and then Troy, the bass player, they listened to Pink Floyd's Animals. And so they all 3 sing on the album, which I think is what brings it to this level of something that's unique and that I want to get on this. I just love how the song, it's a short song. It's like 5 minutes, 45 seconds. I love how it just changes on a dime rhythmically and melodically. Rhythmically because that's the way that they play, but also just melodically because you got these different singers. And it's a sort of song that we kind of alluded to this with Tool, like it's really complex and complicated, but it works on just a basic groove level. As a drummer, I love Brandaler's drumming. He's one of maybe the busiest drummer in modern drumming today. He's always playing fills. And he does these like super long fills in the song that extend beyond the measure, and then it kind of picks back up. And I love, as someone who loves metal, and I also love like stoner rock and some punk, they combine all that with technical prog metal in this album. And lastly, conceptually, it's a high concept. And so I won't bore you with all the details, but there's 5 classical Greek elements: water, earth, fire, air, and ether, which is like spirit. This album is conceptually based around ether. One of the songs in here is written for Brand's 14-year-old sister that committed suicide. And so there's some of that kind of depth in the lyrics that I really like. and they've made albums on 4 of those classical elements. We'll see if they get to air one day. But that's my quick take on Oblivion.
Good take.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kyle does his research.
Always.
One thing you mentioned that I wish we saw more of in metal, whether it's progressive metal or just metal in general, is multiple vocals. You know, I love when, you know, Queen was basically a multiple vocal band, obviously a lot of Freddie, but they were a multiple vocal band. Beatles, Kiss, whoever you want to name, like that used to be a thing in the 70s. And I think it's a device that's just not exploited enough in metal.
Agreed.
I'd like to see more multiple vocal bands.
Yeah. The band
There are
does
some.
it so well.
Yeah.
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 All right, Dan.
I agree.
All right, guys. You knew
No
this
pressure.
was coming.
No pressure. No pressure.
As much as it pains me not to pick Pain of Salvation or Lepers,
Ooh.
Come on.
it's prog metal. It's me. It's Symphony X.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, let me talk about them for a bit. I would divide their catalog into 3 eras, and it gets more and more metal over time. Their latest albums are all very heavy. They had very perfect songs that would perfectly fit here. And Russell Allen's vocals also get more aggressive over time too, which is great. But to me, my favorite era is their middle one, from Divine Wings through the Odyssey. They hit that sweet spot between prog and orchestral and heaviness and riffs, you name it, perfectly, all their elements. So yeah, just a couple weeks back, we were on the 90s Ultimate podcast, and spoiler alert, I picked Divine Wings of Tragedy on that, which is one of my favorite songs ever. But for the sake of variety, I'm going a different direction, and my pick is Through the Looking Glass. Because what's more prog than a song about Alice in Wonderland, right? And the album is Twilight in Olympus, which was one of the proggest albums last year. And I was happy to see all the positive reaction it got from the fans and readers of the Prog Report. This song is a classic. It's 13 minutes long, not too long, not too short. It's very keyboard and piano oriented, but you got all the classic Michael Romeo riffs and noodlings and insane solos and that kind of stuff. And well, I've said enough. Through the Looking Glass, Symphony X.
Yeah, I think I had you written down for Symphony X, Caligula's Horse, Pain of Salvation.
Yeah, man, it was tough. I have Pain of Salvation here, and it could go either way. Maybe if we've done this another week.
We just give Daniel a bonus pick. I mean, come on.
Thank you. So Pain of Salvation, Idio
Bonus
Glosia.
If at the end of this Pain of Salvation's not been picked, we're giving Daniel a bonus pick. This is
Thank
not
you.
my podcast.
It's so
but that's my
tough to
vote.
make. I mean, God, this
Dude,
is
it's an
so many
impossible
bands are
task.
going to get
Yeah.
left off. This happens every time. It's so brutal
Yeah.
to do it. All right, Jeff.
Well, since I felt a little pressured to not pick Arcturus, In the Woods, Beyond Dawn, Godam's Guard, Solefald, all my beloved Norwegian weirdos.
I'm so confused.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
look into
Are
it,
these-
man.
are these-
I'll send you a suggested playlist after this.
Sure.
I had to go with Fate's Warning, not because I want to push my book or anything. You know, Fate's Warning fans will buy it or they won't buy it. I don't care. I love Fate's Warning. And I think that I almost didn't want to say this, but but I'll say it. They tend to get sort of like, you look at the big 3 of prog metal. It's usually Dream Theater, Queensryche, Fate's Warning. I've always been one. I love all of those bands. Been into those bands for a long time. I'm old, but to me, Fate's Warning are the most consistently awesome of those bands. They've given me so much. I just find their music so evergreen. Like it just none of the eras ever seem old to me. I just can't wait to hear them again. They're a huge band for me. So I picked something from Perfect Symmetry, arguably their most proggy album. It was right before Terry Brown came on board with them. I would have liked to heard the album produced by Terry Brown, but it wasn't. Nevertheless, there's a song on there called At Fate's Hands, which is 7 minutes of epicness. It could have been 20 minutes. They just truncated it down to 7. Kevin Moore from Dream Theater happens to play on that. It starts out in this really orchestral fashion with the string quartet, I believe. Gets into some serious playing. Very spare on the vocals. Ray just comes in for a little bit, very gentle, very delicate verses, and then they're off on a tangent. And Jim Mateos told me that he thinks that it's their ripoff of Kansas Magnum Opus, which he might think that, but I tend to disagree. I think it's its own song, and I think it's absolutely worthy of being considered as one of the top 15 prog metal tracks. It's Fate's Warning at kind of a certain climax in a way.
Nice.
So speaking for a fellow prog reporter who is one of the biggest Fate's Warning fans,
Awesome.
Kyle Graves would be absolutely eating this up. So, but that is an awesome pick. And thank you so much for taking the pressure off of me for having to pick. Great representation.
Awesome. Thanks. Right
you know, Kyle and Jeff kind of favor one another on some level. You said you're an old guy, but you don't look like an old guy. So I don't know what.
They
Maybe
have
listening to Fate's Warning is like a secret to longevity or something.
Possibly the fountain of youth. Fountain of youth for sure.
I better get on that.
Well, they both have the long hair too, right?
They're kind of like they're doppelgangers.
He's a mix between Kyle and Jeff.
I'm just saying.
That's great. Well, thank you for covering Fate's Warning, because I was even feeling pressure to fill them in, and
I have a question for Jeff now that we got Fate's Warning out of the way. Their last album, their last song of the 13th album, which is the 13th track, is called The Last Song.
Yep.
Any inclination as to the information you got from writing the book, or
Absolutely.
Read the book. You'll find out.
I mean, Ray Alder gave an interview when that last album came out that he basically said, "Yeah, I don't think there's going to be another Fate's Warning album." Now, there have been times in their career where Jim hasn't been sure he's wanted to do another one, but they end up coming back and doing one. For all I know, and this is nothing that's not out there, they haven't made a huge official announcement. But for all I know, and I don't think it's a secret, so I can say it, yeah, they don't have any intention of recording any more albums. When Jim feels spent, or when Jim doesn't feel inspired, he just doesn't do anything. He doesn't force it, I guess. Yeah, that's what I've learned. And I go into that a little bit in the final chapter of the book. So there's more on that from the guys, and yeah.
Right.
That's pretty much, that was by design. The last song on the last album, 13th album, 13 songs. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I'm feeling like I gotta sort of pick. This is great English. Gotta sort of. I have to pick Queensryche, although I felt very closely to maybe picking. Well, I was between Queensryche, Riverside, and Devin Townsend. We almost never pick Devin Townsend on this podcast for some reason, but I don't know how we can leave Queensryche off, and how we can leave off Eyes of a Stranger. So that's where I'm going. And close second, offbeat kind of track was NM156, which is going to be my other pick.
Oh, nice.
But Eyes of a Stranger, I think, is just everything of that genre for me when I was growing up listening to that. It was like metal Pink Floyd. I'd never heard anything like it. And, probably their most successful album. Well, Empire's more commercially successful, but the one all fans like and is their most, I guess, acclaimed record and everything is Mindcrime. And that song is the one from it as well. So, yeah, Eyes of a Stranger.
Very nice. Yeah, if you don't have Queensryche and Fates and Dream Theater on this list, GTFO. There's just, you got to have those. So thank you for filling that gap.
Although, man, still a lot of great stuff left off. There's a lot in there in the progressive metal world. I mean,
I was like, which song from American Soldier are you going to pick?
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Kidding.
Yeah, yes, I know. All right, Fix. So you have everything left to choose from.
That's all
what are you going with?
Well, thinking this is the ultimate album, and we're going to listen to these songs in sequence from, Kyle's, and then now I'm last. Just trying to think of a great ending, and we're talking prog metal, so it's got to be metal, but prog, it's got to be epic and huge, and just what I keep thinking of is what's the best way of closing out an album with just being overwhelmed with a wall of sound. But this particular song, I got to experience this song live on Progressive Nation at Sea. I specifically remember just going into the theater hall in the front of the ship, and this song came on. And the other thing that makes this song very proggy is that he's got a female lead vocalist, Anna Van Giersbergen. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, Van Giersbergen. Yep.
The name of the song is Grace.
Wow.
Grace is prog in the standpoint of how it starts off nice and soft, very, delicate vocal over the top. And when that chorus kicks in with the choir and just everything else and just droning on that low string, that is as metal as it gets. And I think it's as epic and prog as it gets. And I think that'd be a great closing song for this album. So Grace takes it for me.
Nice.
Man,
I'm glad you picked Devin. I am. I think he really needed to be, if we were doing a podcast where we had Devin on one of these things, it should have been this one. So I'm glad somebody picked him.
I could have picked Singularity, because that is just an insane, such a genius song as far as how he brings melodies in and out. I really had a hard time picking between these last two. I knew that I wanted to pick him just because he is metal, and he's kind of like Tool from the standpoint of he's kind of hard to pin down because of all the different projects and bands that he's been involved with, where he has done pretty extreme metal, but he's also done some really psychedelic stuff. So he's an artist that is respected, and I think it's worthy to bring him up here. But I really had a hard time trying to pin one song.
The other
down
song I had written down from him that I was maybe gonna pick was Earth Day, from Terria. But it's not an artist I was very familiar with up until probably Progressive Nation at Sea. I knew who he was. I'd heard a couple of songs. It was way too metal. I figured it's just not for me. But I remember what you're talking about, walking into the theater and seeing, and it was just the loudest show I've ever seen in my life. It was just nuts. But the thing with him is that when you go from different album to album, they're all very different, and they all offer something interesting and unique. And so you can't just say, I don't like Devin Townsend, because you might have listened to one record and it has nothing to do with the other 7 records. So, it's worth it. It's an artist worth exploring, because he's one of the most unique musicians out there.
And even
I have to correct you. You actually can say that you don't like Devin Townsend, but go ahead.
Well, you can. I was going to comment on that a little bit, where even if you don't like him, I've kind of always been on the fence, but I appreciate him so much. I like seeing him live, and one of those reasons, and I saw Grace being done live. I think it was at Prog Power in Atlanta, and I think Annika was there singing too. I don't remember. But Grace was done, to my memory anyway. But the great thing about him live is looking in the audience and seeing how many people are smiling. Like, when do you get that at a metal show that's that heavy? There's something about the vibe that he gives to people that I'm like, whether you like him or not, you have to love what he puts out and what people give back. Seriously, go to a Devin show next time you can.
Well,
look at the audience.
The last concert we saw,
That's
Rick
right.
and I went to see Devin Townsend with
Oh, wow.
Haken. That was the last concert I've been to over a year ago. And that's the thing, is that musically it can come off very serious and intense and heavy and whatever. Live, he doesn't take himself seriously whatsoever.
It's fun.
It's all fun, and it's a joke, and he's goofing off and having fun. And it does change. It's not your typical show. You're right. It's not like going to see Opeth or Steven Wilson or something.
Opeth is very funny too.
Different. But that's great.
Can we get to honor? Can we get to honorable mentions?
Just do the roundup now. Yeah.
You're like a
Okay.
kid on Christmas, Vic. You're like, can we please? I'm excited too.
Well,
Yeah,
because
well, go ahead.
Well, how can Periphery not make this list? It's
Easily. Oh, sorry.
yeah.
well, Kyle,
yeah,
you had Reptile before.
Yeah,
our
I was
chapter.
thinking
That's
about-
the song I was going to maybe pick if it came around, because I think that's
Reptile.
just the
I
best
think
song they
Race
have.
Car. You can make an argument for great band. They just missed it for me.
I just Marigold, Icarus Lives. Those are really cool metal songs that a lot of people just have that in their in their wheelhouse. And they kind of took what Meshuggah did and applied it to a more proggier side of things, even though they're still pretty heavy. So I'm again, it's just we had what 15
Well,
songs?
my few honorable mentions were, I mean, like I said, Riverside, Second Life Syndrome was one. Carnival was also possibility, and Leprous, which I thought I might go with The Price maybe, or Flood or something, one of those.
Roy, I never do this, but excuse me, but I'll say one line about each of my honorable mentions.
Go ahead.
I had of the mentioned bands, I had Porcupine Tree, Blackest Eyes, Haken, The Endless Knot, and Leprous, Stuck. As I said, the two bands that I alluded to earlier when I said about Carrying the Torch, they're amazing bands that should always be on the forefront of the conversation. Of course, I had Pain of Salvation. I had either Beyond the Pale or Perfect Element or Idioglossa. Since I wasn't going to pick them, I didn't really decide, but they should be here and they are in my heart.
They should be the last song, and you can add it as a bonus track because Beyond the Pale ends Remedy Lane.
Beyond the Pale can be
their best
we can make
album.
that the honorary bonus track if we all agree. I would.
I had
Gotta be on
Riverside too, Hyperactive. I think Riverside is a great metal band that Marius, as he puts it, he makes songs that sound like songs, even though it gets heavy, it gets metal, it gets technical. It sounds like a song, like very well written stuff. And I also had a sleeper pick in Arc, Heal the Waters. It's a sleeper pick from an underlooked album, and Jorn Land is one of the best to ever do it. So I figured I just got to shout him up. And
Jeff,
also,
Jeff, you got any?
I hadn't thought about these, and I certainly don't have songs because I hadn't thought about it, but I would, and I agree with Daniel on Leprous, and some other good ones have been named. So I'll name some stuff that hasn't been named. My inclination goes to like Cynic, certainly something off Focus, just a pioneering album in every single way.
I just want to
Nick is very
say
It made our last podcast, but not this one, ironically.
Okay, well, there you go. A weird band called KO Dot, who I love, and who, when they dip into metal, they are about as avant-garde as it gets, but still quite listenable. I think about I named all my Norwegian favorites, so that's off the table.
I've got
it's weird to say, but probably Rush. Like, I consider a lot of 70s Rush early metal. And, you talk about Dream Theater influencing the scene. Well, Rush were right there too, influencing Dream Theater. So, I stayed away from them just because they've been mentioned plenty on other Prog Report podcasts, and, they're everywhere. But certainly something like Natural Science, it has so much metallic component to it.
Yeah.
That I would mention them as well.
we never mentioned any of the instrumental bands too, like LTE, Animals as Leaders, Scale the
Sure.
Summit, but they're all
Right.
also in the
Yeah.
same wheelhouse.
Yeah, we left those off. One band I've been listening to a lot because it's been in our recent discussions was Jolly, and I would throw their song "The Pattern"
The pattern,
in,
yeah,
in this
so
mix
fun.
because that
yeah.
song is insane. It's so good, so good.
Yeah. I had a whole thing written out about physical education by Animals as Leaders, but it got edged out. We talked about this in the before the podcast. Messaging was Metallica and whether they would fit in songs like "And Justice for All"
Justice
or
for All.
maybe Orion or something. But I didn't think Metallica needed our press for one thing.
Yes.
But,
So
so in
one-
10 years, who like bands that are coming out just within the last 4 or 5 years would be making this list. That would be interesting if we're failing to mention some of those. But anyway, Vic had something, I think.
back in the 90s, Dream Theater came out with a prog metal, and there was a big push. And at the time, you had Magna Carta as a label, and there were lots of really cool bands. If I had a chance, if you guys had all, picked, then everything was going, but it didn't happen, and I wasn't expecting it to. I did have a Shadow Gallery. You talk about the combination of like power metal with prog and sort of, ethereal sounding with great choruses. Crystalline Dream, I think it's the popular pick out of Carved in Stone back in 1995. There's one band called Lemmer Voice. I think they only had one album out.
I knew you were going to mention those guys.
But it's, it's not very, I mean, if you listen to it, it's prog, it's awesome. It's very good.
It's
You gotta
super derivative though.
It is.
I think everybody we mentioned here has their own unique sound for one. And I think
yes,
that's probably what we comes across with this, right? Is that they're bands with their own unique style and very influential and longevity for the most part. So I think
I don't know if this is appropriate for me to even say on air, so you can maybe edit it out, but doing a podcast or an episode on all the bands from the mid 90s that followed in Dream Theater's wake, who kind of implemented the Dream Theater approach. There were tons of those. There were armies of those for a while, I mean, sounds like Victor could probably run that show, because it's
he was listening to half that stuff. Right.
Wow.
I mean, they were a
Yeah.
complete Dream Theater copy at the time. I remember. It was, yeah.
Which is
That's
why it was a
great.
good first pick, So
Right.
you
Yeah.
write the map and people copy it. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's true. Yeah, it's it's
Well,
flattering.
I think we covered everything, guys. Jeff, I know you got to run, and it's been great seeing you, man, and great having you
Yeah,
on
you
and
too.
chatting. And,
Nice to see you and meet all you guys. And
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so
Thanks.
keep an eye out for the Fates Warning book. Does it have a title? I forget it.
Destination Onward.
Destination Onward. So look out for that, and we'll see you guys elsewhere. Keep up to date on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, our podcast, and progreport.com and all that. We'll see you guys next time.
Awesome. See you guys.
Bye.
Bye,
bye
guys.
everybody.